The morning started in a slow and gentle way, almost like the world was trying to wake people up without rushing them. The airport was busy, of course, but not loud in the stressful way it usually was on weekends. It felt more like a weekday morning, where most travelers walked with purpose rather than panic. In the middle of all this steady movement, a father named Mr. Lewis walked through the terminal with his twin children close by his side. The twins, a boy and a girl, were around 10 years old. They looked excited, not because they loved airplanes, but because this trip was a mix of business and a short vacation. Their father had important meetings scheduled once they landed, but he promised them that after his work was done, the rest of their time would be just for fun. That promise alone was enough to keep the twins smiling the whole morning. They each carried a small backpack filled with things to keep them busy. Inside the boy's bag, there were drawing pencils he liked to use for sketching buildings. He always said he wanted to design tall towers one day. His sister carried a book she had already read twice, but she still loved opening it again whenever she needed comfort. The two were different in many ways, but they shared a calm, gentle nature that made people smile when they talked. The three of them were not taking a commercial flight. Instead, they were boarding a private business jet arranged by the company where Mr. Lewis worked. It wasn't a fancy luxury flight, just a practical one meant to help him reach his meetings on time without long delays. The twins had flown with their father before, but private jets still felt special to them, like stepping into a quiet little world away from the crowd. As they walked toward the private terminal, Mr. Lewis kept checking on the twins. Their medical condition didn't stop them from living normal lives, but he made sure they always had what they needed. Every time they traveled, he brought their special dissolvable pills, the ones that helped them stay steady during long flights. The pills weren't dangerous. They were simply part of the children's daily routine, something they had been taking for years without problems. Inside the private lounge, the atmosphere was calm. There were only a few passengers waiting, and the staff greeted Mr. Lewis politely. He responded with his usual warm smile, the kind of smile that made everyone around him relax. The twins settled into soft chairs while he handled the check-in details. Once everything was cleared, a member of the ground staff approached them. "Your plane is ready whenever you are." "Oh," the staff member said kindly. Mr. Lewis thanked him and gestured for his children to follow. They grabbed their backpacks and walked behind him toward the jet. The aircraft wasn't large, but it was clean and well-kept. It had soft lighting and seats arranged neatly, creating a peaceful environment for the flight ahead. Standing at the entrance of the jet was a flight attendant named Kelly. She looked a little tense, as if she was still getting used to her job. It was her first month on this particular type of aircraft, and although she had received training, she still worried about making mistakes. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her hair was pinned back so tightly that it almost looked like she didn't want even a single strand out of place. She smiled when the passengers approached, though it was the polite type of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She greeted Mr. Lewis first, then the twins, and guided them to their seats with gestures that were maybe just a little too stiff. But she wasn't cold, just nervous. She was trying very hard to appear professional. The twins sat beside each other while their father took the seat across the aisle. They placed their backpacks under the seats in front of them, and once they were settled, Mr. Lewis leaned over to check if they were comfortable. "Let me know if you need anything," he reminded them gently. The twins nodded. They already knew what they needed to do once the plane took off and reached cruising height. They would take their dissolvable pills. It was part of their routine, something their father always supervised. The pills kept them balanced during long flights, helping them stay relaxed and preventing the dizziness they sometimes experienced at high altitudes. For now, the twins simply rested, enjoying the soft hum of the aircraft as the crew prepared for takeoff. Kelly moved about the cabin, checking storage compartments and making sure everything was secure. She was the kind of person who believed rules were written for a reason. She followed them so closely that even small details made her anxious. When she noticed the twins whispering and opening their small pill container to get ready ahead of time, something in her expression tightened. But she didn't speak yet. She simply observed from a distance, unsure whether she should intervene. She didn't want to accuse anyone of breaking a rule without being completely sure. Still, she made a mental note to check on them later. Mr. Lewis didn't notice her watching. He was reviewing documents on his tablet, preparing for the meeting he had after landing. But he wasn't the kind of father who ignored his children. Every few minutes, he glanced up to make sure they were all right. The captain soon stepped out of the cockpit to greet the passengers. He exchanged a few friendly words with Mr. Lewis, then spoke to the twins with a smile that was much warmer and more relaxed than Kelly's. After giving his welcome, he returned to the cockpit to begin final preparations. The engines hummed louder. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the plane began to move toward the runway. The twins looked out the window with wide eyes. They had seen this many times before, but the feeling of taking off never lost its magic. As the jet climbed into the sky, the cabin steadied. The noise became smoother, and the seatbelt sign eventually switched off. The twins reached for their small, clearly labeled medical container. Their father nodded, letting them know the timing was fine. They opened the lid together, careful and calm. The dissolvable tablets were small, harmless, and familiar to them. They placed them on their napkins to prepare. This was the moment when Kelly finally decided to approach. She had been watching from the other end of the aisle, feeling uneasy without fully understanding why. In her training, she had been reminded about safety, monitoring passengers, and avoiding unverified substances on flights. It made her overly cautious, especially with things she didn't recognize, when she walked toward them. The twins didn't think much of it. They assumed she was coming to ask if they needed water or snacks, but instead, she leaned closer to their tray table and glanced at the small pills with a concerned expression. "What are these?" she asked, her voice tight, though she was trying to sound calm. The twins exchanged a confused look. They weren't used to adults questioning their medication, especially not in a tone that felt like they had done something wrong. The boy spoke softly. "There are travel pills. We take them on flights." Kelly studied the container. The label was there, clear and official, but she seemed unsure. Instead of reading it carefully, she focused on the fact that she didn't personally recognize the medication. Her lack of experience made her nervous. "Passengers can't take unapproved substances during flights," she said, her voice firmer now. "These need to be checked." The twins looked alarmed. They had never heard of such a rule. They had taken these pills on many flights before. The girl tried to explain gently. "Our doctor gave these to us. We take them all the time." Kelly hesitated. She wasn't trying to be unkind. She wasn't angry. She simply didn't want to make a mistake that could get her in trouble. But in trying to avoid a mistake, she was about to make one. Before the twins could finish explaining, she reached toward the pills. The twins instinctively tried to stop her, but she acted too quickly. She picked up one of the dissolvable tablets between her fingers, examining it like it was suspicious. Then, without thinking twice, she pressed her thumb against it. The pill crumbled instantly, turning into harmless powder on her glove. A soft gasp escaped from the twins at the same time. Their hearts sank. That pill mattered not because it was rare or dangerous, but because it was the last dose they needed for the day. They didn't carry extras on this trip because the doctor had advised only the exact required amount. Kelly didn't notice their reaction at first. She looked at the powdered pill and frowned. "I need to report this," she muttered, still convinced she was following proper safety steps. The twins looked crushed. Their eyes filled with worry as they stared at the remaining tablet, still whole, but now there only one left. Their father looked up at that moment, noticing the fear on their faces. "What happened?" he asked, standing slowly. The twins were too shocked to answer. Their voices felt stuck in their throats. Kelly lifted the powdered remains of the pill as if she had uncovered something important. She began to explain her actions, still believing she had acted correctly, unaware of the emotional damage she had just caused. In that small moment, the calm atmosphere of the flight shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in a quiet, tense way that made the twins feel like something important had just gone wrong. Mr. Lewis stepped closer, concern deepening in his eyes as he saw what was left of the crushed pill on Kelly's glove, and that was the moment everything truly began to unravel. The moment the crushed pill fell from Kelly's glove, the energy in the cabin shifted in a quiet but heavy way. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no chaos, but the atmosphere thickened with confusion and worry. The twins sat frozen, staring at the powdered bits like they couldn't believe what had happened. It wasn't just a broken pill to them. It was something they depended on during flights, something that kept their bodies steady. Losing it felt like losing a shield they needed. Mr. Lewis stepped closer, trying to understand the situation before reacting. He always believed in staying calm, especially in front of his children. But when he saw the concern in their eyes, a protective instinct rose inside him. He didn't raise his voice, but the seriousness in his expression deepened. "What happened here?" he asked softly, but clearly. The boy looked up first, still shaken. "She crushed my pill," he said in a small voice. His sister nodded, still holding the remaining tablet in her palm, afraid even to breathe too hard in case something else went wrong. Kelly straightened her posture as if she needed to defend her actions immediately. Her nerves were already high, and she spoke with the brisk tone of someone trying to sound certain, even when they were unsure inside. They were about to take something without approval. "I needed to check it for safety reasons." Mr. Lewis stared at the crushed powder. The label on the pill container was clear, professionally printed, prescribed by a licensed doctor. It wasn't something random or suspicious. But instead of arguing right away, he took a slow breath. The kind someone takes right before choosing their words very carefully. "You crushed it before even asking me," he said. Still calm, but firmer now. Kelly blinked, taken aback. She hadn't considered that angle at all. She had been so focused on rules and procedures she barely recognized that she acted before understanding the situation fully. They shouldn't take unknown substances. She insisted, her voice wobbling slightly. "It's part of safety protocol." The girl finally spoke, her voice trembling. "It's our medicine. We always take it." Hearing that made Kelly's certainty weaken. She opened her mouth to respond, but found herself stuck between pride and doubt. She had acted quickly, maybe too quickly, but admitting that felt hard. She was still new, still worried about making mistakes. And her fear of doing the wrong thing had pushed her into doing something even more wrong. Mr. Lewis gently placed a hand on the back of one of the seats, trying to hold on to his patience. "These pills are prescribed by their doctor," he said. "They're not dangerous. They're part of their medical needs." Kelly looked down at the powdered pill, suddenly aware that she might have misjudged the entire situation. But her training echoed in her mind. Don't allow suspicious items. Monitor passengers. Prevent risks. That training had not prepared her for a moment like this, where real human needs mattered more than a vague safety rule. She barely understood. The twins looked to their father for reassurance. He knelt beside them, examining the remaining pill. "Do you both feel okay?" he asked gently. The boy nodded hesitantly. The girl didn't speak, but the tightness in her face showed. She was trying hard to stay brave. He knew the pills helped them manage dizziness at high altitudes. Without the full dosage, they might be uncomfortable, but they weren't in immediate danger, at least not yet. Still, the emotional shock was clear. Kelly stood awkwardly near them, unsure whether to apologize or to continue explaining. She felt the weight of the moment growing heavier by the second. She wasn't a bad person, not cruel or careless. She simply didn't understand the situation and reacted out of fear of doing her
job wrong.
"I was only trying to keep everyone safe," she said in a quieter voice this time. Mr. Lewis met her eyes. "Safety is important, but understanding is important too." That one sentence hit her harder than any angry yelling would have. It made her realize that following rules without thinking about the people involved could cause more harm than good. Before anyone could speak again, the cabin intercom chimed softly, announcing that the flight had reached its stable cruise altitude. The steady hum of the engines filled the background, almost reminding everyone that they were now far above the ground with nowhere else to go. Mr. Lewis gently guided the twins to lean back in their seats. He took the remaining pill from his daughter's hand and inspected it. He knew they needed it, but he also knew they only had one left now. Giving one child the tablet and leaving the other without wasn't an option. They had to share the discomfort, or he had to make another decision altogether. The situation wasn't dangerous, but it was serious. More serious than Kelly had realized. He pressed the service button, signaling for a senior crew member, a secondary attendant who had more experience. Within moments, a woman named Dana appeared, calm and professional, with a warm presence that instantly eased the tension around the seats. She had been working in aviation for over a decade and understood passenger care on a deeper level. "What seems to be the issue?" Dana asked softly. Kelly spoke fast, explaining her version of events in a tone that sounded more nervous the longer she talked. Dana listened without interruption, her expression patient but thoughtful. When Kelly finished, Dana looked toward Mr. Lewis. "Is that correct?" she asked respectfully. He nodded. "Mostly. The part she missed is that these pills are their prescribed medication." She acted before asking. Dana took the pill container and read the label carefully. She didn't rush. She didn't assume. She simply used her experience and listened to both sides. "These are safe. Clearly prescribed and allowed on flights," she said gently, making sure Kelly heard it clearly. "Passengers with medical conditions have every right to take what they need." Kelly's shoulders sank slightly. She looked down at the floor, realizing the weight of her mistake. "I thought it was something else," she murmured. "I understand," Dana replied kindly. "But we always ask first, especially when children are involved." The twins watched quietly, relieved that someone finally understood. Their father reached for their hands and held them both, grounding them emotionally. The plane felt quiet again, but it was a fragile quiet. It's the kind that comes after a misunderstanding that still has consequences. Dana turned to Mr. Lewis. "If you'd like, I can speak to the captain. We can check if there's a medical kit on board with anything that might help ease their discomfort if needed." He appreciated the offer. "Thank you. That would help." She nodded and stepped toward the cockpit. Kelly stayed where she was, unsure whether to leave or stay. She wanted to apologize, but something about the moment made her feel stuck, almost embarrassed. Her chest felt tight, not because she was defensive anymore, but because she truly hadn't meant to cause harm. "Didn't understand," she said softly, finally breaking the silence. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Mr. Lewis looked at her not with anger, but with a disappointment that stung more than harsh words ever could. "I know you didn't mean harm," he said calmly. "But sometimes doing the right thing means taking a moment to ask questions instead of assuming." His words were gentle, but they were also a lesson she knew she needed. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the twins. "I didn't want to upset you." The boy nodded, accepting the apology faster than his sister, who took a moment before giving a small nod as well. Kids had pure hearts. They could forgive easily, but the emotional impact still lingered. Dana returned a minute later, walking with a sense of purpose, but also thoughtfulness. She leaned toward Mr. Lewis. "The captain would like to speak with you privately," she said. The twins looked up at their father immediately. Worried that something worse was happening. "It's all right," he reassured them. "I'll be right back." He stood, straightened his jacket, and followed Dana toward the front of the plane. Kelly remained near the seats, shifting uncomfortably, unsure of whether she should continue working or step aside. She began organizing small items on the counter, trying to stay busy while her thoughts raced. In the cockpit area, the captain listened carefully as Dana briefed him on what happened. When Mr. Lewis joined them, the captain greeted him respectfully. "I'm very sorry for the trouble," he said. "Your children's comfort and safety come first." Mr. Lewis nodded, still calm. "Thank you. I'm concerned about the missing dose and their well-being." The captain understood immediately. "If needed, we can make adjustments. This flight is yours as much as ours. We'll handle whatever is required." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a demand. It was simply a statement of capability and respect. Mr. Lewis appreciated that. He trusted professionals who handled matters with thought and care, while the adults discussed solutions. The twins sat in their seats quietly. They whispered to each other, trying to make sense of everything. They didn't want anyone to get in trouble, but the incident still scared them. They didn't like feeling accused of doing something wrong, when all they were trying to do was follow their routine. Kelly glanced at them occasionally, her chest tightening with guilt each time. She replayed the moment she crushed the pill over and over in her mind, realizing how rash it had been. She wished she could go back a few minutes and simply ask what the pills were. Just one calm question could have avoided all this. When Mr. Lewis returned to the cabin, his face was thoughtful but steady. He reassured the twins again and told them everything would be all right. They trusted him. They always did. He sat beside them and gently placed his hand on their shoulders. Everything wasn't fixed yet, but something important had begun. The misunderstanding that started with a single crushed pill was slowly unfolding into something much larger, something that would change the rest of the flight, and everyone's perspective on how small actions can deeply affect others. The next minutes on the plane felt heavier than anything earlier that day. The air inside the cabin was still warm from takeoff, but now it felt thick, almost like everyone could sense something wasn't right, even if they didn't know the details. The twins sat quietly, their small legs not fully touching the floor, their hands resting in their laps as if they were afraid to make a sound. They were taught to be polite, gentle, and respectful. But at that moment, they were simply scared. Their father sat between them, trying to look calm for their sake. His voice earlier had sent a message through the cabin comm, steady, but firm in a way that made even strangers glance over with a mix of interest and concern. He wasn't shouting, wasn't being rude, wasn't trying to cause a scene. He was a parent whose children's medication had been crushed by someone who should have been helping them. And now he was forced to figure out what to do next while keeping his son steady. The flight attendant who, moments earlier, had been standing tall with the confidence of someone used to authority, now stood near the front of the cabin, speaking softly to another crew member. Her earlier tone, full of certainty and annoyance, had slipped away. Now her hands were fidgeting with the corner of a safety card, her face tense. She kept glancing back toward the family as if expecting something, an apology, second chance, or maybe another confrontation. But the father barely looked at her. His focus was completely on his boys. One of the twins leaned his head lightly against his father's arm. The other shifted closer too, both of them mirroring each other unconsciously the same way they always did when they were nervous. Their father put a hand on each of their backs, rubbing slow circles, whispering softly so no one else could hear. No anger, no frustration in his voice, just reassurance. That was always the kind of father he was. The nearby passengers pretended not to stare, though some clearly wanted to. A woman 2 rows ahead kept glancing back with worried eyes, while a man across the aisle folded his arms and tried to follow the safety instructions on the screen. It was obvious he wasn't taking in anything. People didn't want to get involved, but they couldn't help feeling the weight of what had happened. What made everything more complicated was that the plane was no longer climbing. It was leveling off in a way that felt unusual. The father noticed it almost immediately. His job required him to be aware of details, aware of shifts, aware of patterns. This wasn't part of a normal ascent. The twins noticed too, though they didn't have the words for it. They simply felt the strange change and tightened their grip on their day. Father's arms. The captain's voice finally came through the speakers. Smooth and controlled, but there was something else beneath his tone. Something careful. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a small issue that requires our attention before we continue the flight. For now, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We will update you shortly. No mention of what the issue was. No mention of medication. No mention of the confrontation. But the father knew. He wasn't sure if the captain had already been told, or if the crew was still deciding how to present the situation. What mattered was that an emergency stop might be necessary. His sons needed their medication. Not in an hour. Not later now. And the pills were gone. The crushed powder on the flight attendant's glove kept replaying in his mind. The way she had acted as if she knew better than he did. The way she hadn't even bothered to ask what the pills were for. The way she dismissed the twins' quiet attempts to explain. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Anger wouldn't help them now. What he needed was a solution. He kept his voice low so the twins wouldn't sense his worry. "Everything will be okay," whispered. "I promise you both." One twin nodded. The other swallowed hard. They trusted him completely. That trust made him even more determined. A second flight attendant, the older one with calm eyes approached their row slowly. She knelt slightly so she wasn't towering over the children. Small, thoughtful gesture that made the father appreciate her kindness. "Sir, may I speak with you for a moment?" she asked softly. He nodded but didn't move away from his children. "You can speak here." She understood why he wasn't leaving them. Her voice stayed gentle. "I spoke with the captain. He wants to understand exactly what happened. And he also wants to know if your sons need immediate medical care." The father looked down at his boys. Their faces were calm, but only because they were trying very hard to be brave. He turned back to her. "They do," he said. "They don't take the pills for fun. They take them because their bodies need help staying steady. If they go too long without them, their heart rate can spike. Their breathing can shift. It's not something we can ignore." Her eyebrows tightened with concern. "Do they have any more medication with them? Maybe in checked luggage? Or another form? A liquid form? Anything?" He gently shook his head. "That was the only dose for this flight. The rest is at home. I never imagined something like this could happen. It's always kept with us. Always." She inhaled deeply, her worry clear and genuine. "I understand. I'm truly sorry, sir. The captain is considering turning around, but he needs confirmation that it's necessary."
It is,
he said without hesitation. She nodded once, firmly, like someone making a decision in her own mind. "I'll relay that." Before she stood, she looked at the twins and gave them a warm smile, one that didn't feel forced or formal. One of the boys managed a small smile back, and the father appreciated that little exchange more than she probably realized. When she walked away, the father gently squeezed the twins' hands again. He was doing everything he could, but he also knew that some things were now out of his hands. The plane belonged to the captain, the airline, the policies, but his responsibility was his children, and he wasn't going to let anything happen to them. Minutes passed with no announcement. The quiet waiting was almost worse than the earlier tension. People were whispering softly, curious about the pause in the flight. And some were clearly trying to piece together what had caused it. The father didn't respond to anyone's looks. He was focused on the boys, watching their breathing carefully. A small cough came from one twin, nothing alarming, but enough to remind the father that the clock was ticking. The other twin leaned against him again, his little fingers curling into the fabric of his sleeve like they used to when they were toddlers. Finally, the captain spoke again. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Due to a medical concern on board, we will be returning to the departure airport. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened as we prepare to turn back." Soft murmurs spread through the cabin. Some passengers looked surprised, others frustrated, but no one openly complained. The father felt a wave of relief wash through him. Not because he wanted the flight to end, but because now the boys had a chance. The plane began its slow turn. The father looked out the window at the clouds' shifting direction, and his mind played through all the things he needed to do once they landed to get the boys checked. Make sure their breathing stayed normal. Find a way to replace the medication quickly. And yes, deal with the incident that caused this. But that would come later. Their health came first. The younger of the twins tugged on his sleeve lightly. "Are we in trouble?" he asked in a small voice. The father smiled gently and brushed a hand through his hair. "No, you're not in trouble. Not at all. None of this is your fault. We're just going home because we need to, because of the medicine." The other twin asked. "Yes," he said softly, "but everything's going to be okay." They both nodded at the same time, and he felt that familiar ache of love in his chest. They were good children, kind, thoughtful, careful. They didn't deserve this kind of fear. Another cough sounded, a little stronger this time, and the father straightened. His heart tightened. He placed his hand on the boy's back again. "It's okay," he whispered. "Just breathe slow, like I taught you." The boy nodded and followed the pattern. Inhale. Hold for a moment. Exhale slowly. His small chest rose and fell in a rhythm that helped calm him. The father repeated the pattern with him, their breaths sinking. The supportive flight attendant returned, kneeling beside them again. "We're about 15 minutes from landing," she said quietly. If anything changes or if they feel dizzy, please tell me right away. I'm right here. Thank you, the father said. She hesitated for a moment, then asked carefully, would you like water for them? Or juice? Something to keep them calm? Water would be good, he said. She came back moments later with 2 small bottles and placed them gently into the boy's hands. They drank slowly. The cool liquid seemed to help a little. The father could tell she was trying to make up for what had happened even, though she hadn't been the one. Who caused the problem? She cared, and that mattered. As the cabin lights dimmed slightly for landing, the plane descended through the clouds. The engines lowered in pitch, the altitude dropping steadily. The twins held tightly onto their father's hands, and he held them just as firmly. Outside the windows, the faint outline of the city began to appear again, buildings, roads, a faint shimmer of early sunlight reflecting off distant rooftops. The sight brought a sense of closeness to the ground and safety. The captain's voice returned. We'll be on the ground shortly. Please remain seated. Medical staff will meet us at the gate. Medical staff. That was what the family needed. The father felt his breath finally loosen in his chest. But although things were improving for them, the tension in the cabin wasn't gone. People were whispering again, and the flight attendant who had caused the entire problem stood stiffly near the front. Her posture too straight, her expression unclear. She looked like someone waiting for consequences. She hadn't expected when she woke up that morning. The plane touched down with a firm but smooth landing. The wheels roared against the runway, slowing, rumbling, humming as the aircraft made its way toward the gate. The twins pressed closer to their father, relieved and tired. As soon as the plane stopped, a soft chime sounded. But instead of passengers standing up or reaching for overhead bins, the captain's voice came one more time. Everyone, please remain seated. We have medical personnel boarding shortly. Thank you for your cooperation. The door opened, and within seconds, 2 medical staff members entered, wearing calm, professional expressions. They walked straight to the family. Everything was happening in a controlled, quiet way, so the children wouldn't panic. One of the medics knelt beside the boys, speaking gently, checking breathing, pulse, color, and responses. The father explained what had happened carefully, factually, without raising his voice. His tone wasn't angry, just protective. He didn't want drama. He wanted help. The medics nodded with understanding and gave the father a small expression of reassurance. They seem stable right now, I said softly. That's good. But yes, they do need their medication soon. We'll escort you off the plane and make sure they get checked properly. Relief washed through him again. He took a slow breath as they prepared to guide the family off the aircraft. The supportive flight attendant stood aside respectfully. She gave the twins a small wave and whispered, "You two did great." They smiled weakly. The other flight attendant, the one responsible for everything, didn't move. She simply stood there, eyes lowered, looking like she wanted to disappear. The father glanced at her only once, not with anger, but with finality. A silent message. This wasn't the way things should have been. Then he put his arms gently around his son's shoulders and walked with them toward the front of the plane, following the medics into the brighter, cooler air of the jet bridge. The twins stayed close to him the entire way, their trust unbroken. Behind them, the passengers watched quietly, some with sadness, some with sympathy, some with quiet outrage on behalf of the children. But the father didn't notice them. Anymore, his focus was where it had always been, in his boys, their safety. And what would come next once they were fully out of danger? He didn't yet know that this incident would grow far bigger than a single flight. All he knew was that part 3 of their day, this long, tense, unexpected turn, was finally ending, and something much larger was waiting on the other side of that jet bridge. The cabin stayed quiet for a long moment after the captain left to double-check the medical supplies. It wasn't the heavy kind of quiet that feels tense. It was more like everyone in that small space was thinking about what had just happened and what needed to happen next. The twins sat close together, sharing a blanket the crew had offered. Their father stayed beside them, not saying much, just keeping a steady and calm presence so they didn't feel overwhelmed. The hum of the engine sounded softer now, almost like the plane itself was trying to lower the mood. Kelly stood a few steps back, her hands loosely folded in front of her. She looked unsure where she belonged at that moment. She didn't want to intrude, but she also didn't want to disappear and seem careless. She was still carrying the weight of what she had done, and the look on the children's faces kept replaying in her mind. She hadn't meant to scare them. She hadn't meant to make things harder. She truly believed she was preventing something dangerous. But now she could see she acted too fast and knew too little. Dana returned from the cockpit. A few minutes later, with a small medical pouch in her hand, she walked with calm steps. The type of calm that comes from someone who has seen many situations and knows how to keep everyone grounded. She approached Mr. Lewis first, giving him a gentle nod before speaking. "We have some motion comfort tablets in the kit," she said. "Nothing as strong as what they usually take, but it can help lessen the discomfort." Mr. Lewis appreciated the effort. "Anything that helps is fine. Thank you." Dana crouched near the twins and spoke to them directly, her tone warm and soft. "These won't work exactly the same as your medicine, but they might help you feel a bit more settled. Only if you're okay with it." Both children nodded, trusting her in a way that comes naturally when someone speaks gently and listens. She handed the tablets to their father, who helped them take the small, chewable pieces. They weren't perfect, but at least they were something. After that, Dana stood up and looked toward Kelly, not with anger, but with the seriousness of someone who knows an important conversation can't be avoided. She spoke quietly, but clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We need to talk after this flight," she said. "Not for punishment, but for training. We can't have misunderstandings like this." Kelly nodded, her eyes low. "I understand." Mr. Lewis looked at her too, and although his face still carried the weight of the situation, there was no harshness. Just a firm sense of responsibility. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is learning from them. My children will be okay, but next time, someone else might not be." His words weren't meant to hurt her, but they went straight to her heart. She nodded again, slower this time, taking in the reality of what he was saying. It wasn't about embarrassment. It was about the responsibility she carried in her role, when she had not fully understood until now. Dana guided Kelly aside, giving the family a moment to breathe. The twins leaned against their father, who pulled the blanket around them more securely. They looked tired, but calmer. The discomfort from losing their proper medication might come later. But for now, the emotional weight was the bigger challenge. He gently smoothed their hair, reminding them they were safe. The plane carried on smoothly through the sky, and little by little, the pressure in the air seemed to ease. Dana spoke quietly with Kelly in the back galley. It wasn't a scolding conversation. It was more like a mentor guiding someone who wasn't bad at their job, just inexperienced and too eager to follow rules without understanding the human side. "You're not the first new attendant to misunderstand something," Dana said. "It happens. But we have to learn to ask questions first. People trust us up here. They trust us with their comfort, their needs, their safety. And safety isn't just about preventing threats. It's about caring." Kelly swallowed hard, her voice small. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "I know," Dana said. "But the right thing isn't always the quickest action. Sometimes the right thing is slowing down." Kelly breathed in deeply, letting the truth settle. She wanted to be good at her job. She wanted to avoid mistakes. But she now understood that fear of doing something wrong had pushed her into doing something worse, back at the seats. Mr. Lewis noticed Dana and Kelly still talking. He didn't want anyone to feel humiliated because he wasn't that kind of person. But he did want change, not punishment change. He had seen enough situations in business where people made the wrong choice out of pressure or misunderstanding. What mattered wasn't perfection. It was growth. He squeezed his children's hands gently. "How are you both feeling?" he asked softly. "I'm okay," the boy murmured. Though he leaned into his father's side a little more, his sister nodded, just tired. "That's all right," he said. "You can rest. I'm right here." They leaned together, eyes slowly drifting, feeling safer now that things were settling. A few minutes later, Stana returned, standing beside their seats again. "I wanted to give you an update," she said. "The captain is aware of everything and supports whatever decision you feel is best once we land. He wanted me to reassure you that we take this very seriously." Mr. Lewis nodded with appreciation. "Thank you, really." Dana smiled gently. "We're here for you." She stepped back to give them space, while Kelly stayed behind the curtain near the galley, replaying every second in her mind. She didn't know what would happen after landing, and she didn't know what Mr. Lewis planned to say or do. She feared the worst, losing her job, but she also knew she couldn't take back what she had done. All she could do was accept the outcome. Time moved slowly as the plane crossed long stretches of sky. The twins rested, the gentle drone of the engines acting like a lullaby. Mr. Lewis kept checking their comfort level, adjusting their pillows, offering water, and making sure they felt cared for. Fathers sometimes show love in simple ways by being attentive, by staying steady, by quietly holding the world together for their children. After a while, the captain made an announcement, his voice calm and steady through the speakers. He didn't mention anything about the incident, only informed the passengers of slight turbulence ahead. The plane shifted gently through the clouds, causing the lights to flicker softly. The twins held onto their father's arms tightly, but he stayed solid, whispering, "It's just a little bumpy. Nothing to worry about." The turbulence passed quickly, and the cabin returned to its peaceful rhythm as the flight continued. Something subtle began to change in Kelly. Standing in the corner, she watched how Mr. Lewis treated his children with patience, warmth, and understanding. She watched how Dana handled everything with grace, even the difficult parts. And she realized she wanted to be that kind of person, someone who didn't react out of fear, but out of understanding. She stepped forward quietly and spoke to Dana. "When we land, can I speak to him?" "Not to defend myself, just to say I'm sorry properly." Dana nodded with encouragement. "That's the right thing to do? Do you think he'll be angry?" Kelly asked. "I think he'll listen," Dana said. "And that's all you can hope for." Kelly breathed out slowly. She wasn't hoping to be forgiven. She only wanted to do the responsible thing. As the flight neared its final stretch, the atmosphere settled into something more gentle. The children rested peacefully. The engines continued their steady hum, and the growing sense of reflection filled the air like a quiet conversation no one had spoken aloud. Mr. Lewis looked out the window, watching streaks of white clouds slide past. He wasn't thinking about blame. He was thinking about the thousands of families who traveled every day, trusting the people around them. He knew this was more than a personal incident. It was a reminder that care, understanding, and proper training mattered everywhere. From boardrooms to airplanes, he didn't know exactly what he would decide or say after landing, but he knew one thing for sure. The conversation would not be about punishment. It would be about progress. The plane continued forward through the sky, carrying everyone toward the next moment, one that would bring accountability, honesty, and a chance for everyone involved to grow. The plane stayed on the ground longer than anyone expected. And for most passengers, it was a confusing delay. But inside the cabin, something else was happening. Something that touched almost everyone who was paying attention. It wasn't chaos, and it wasn't anger anymore. It was a kind of quiet understanding that people rarely feel while traveling with strangers. The twins sat close to their father now. One rested his shoulder gently against the man, while the other leaned forward, elbows on his knees, as if trying to process everything that had happened in the past hour. Their father stayed calm, even though he had every reason not to be. He spoke to them softly, checking again if they felt any new discomfort, and reminding them that the new set of pills would keep them stable until they reached their destination, the attendant who had caused everything, who had crushed the pills. In a moment of impatience, sat farther down the aisle. She didn't look angry anymore. She didn't look proud or defensive. She looked like someone who finally understood the weight of her actions. She kept touching her hands, rubbing them together the way people do when they're trying to calm nerves. She stared out the window, maybe at nothing. Maybe at everything she wished she had done differently. A senior attendant approached the father again, speaking in a gentle tone. "We've completed all checks. The captain says we'll be ready to take off soon. If you need anything at all, please tell us. The father nodded. Thank you. I just want the boys to stay okay. For the rest of the flight, we'll make sure of it. It's a senior. Attendant placed a small bottle of water on the tray in front of the twins and made sure their seats were fully comfortable. She spoke to them the way someone does when they actually care, not because they have to, but because they want people to feel safe as the engines hummed and the aircraft prepared for departure again. The father looked around the cabin. Some passengers nodded at him as if offering silent support. Others simply watched. Understanding that something important had unfolded, something about fairness, dignity, and the responsibility people carry when they work with the public, the twins' father exhaled deeply. Not with anger, but with relief. The crisis had passed, but the lesson remained. When the plane finally lifted into the sky, the boys looked out the window. The scattered clouds looked soft and peaceful. For the first time that morning, they both seemed to relax fully. Letting their heads rest back against their seats, their father kept a close watch. But he finally allowed himself to breathe a little easier. About an hour later, one twin dozed off. His breathing was steady and calm. His brother stayed awake, glancing at him sometimes, making sure he was okay even while pretending not to worry. The father smiled at this small act. He's fine, he whispered. I know, the boy said softly. I just needed to check. A few rows back, the senior attendant held a quiet conversation with the attendant who had caused the issue. Their voices remained low, but the emotions on their faces said enough. The senior attendant spoke steadily, clearly explaining what had gone wrong and why. The younger attendant listened with a heavy expression. Her guilt was clear. No one was trying to take advantage of it or humiliate her. The purpose wasn't punishment. It was understanding. After some time, the younger attendant slowly made her way toward the family. She stopped beside their row, kept a respectful distance, and spoke gently. Sir, she said, I know you don't have to accept an apology from me, but I do want to say it. I was wrong. I was impatient, and I didn't treat you or your sons the way I should have. I am truly sorry. Her voice trembled slightly. She didn't look away from him, didn't make excuses, didn't try to lighten what she had done. The father looked at her for a long moment. He didn't smile, but he didn't glare either. His voice stayed calm. Thank you for saying that. My son's health isn't something small. Those pills are not optional. What happened today could have gone in a different direction. I hope this helps you understand why I reacted the way I did. It does, she said. It really does. One of the twins, the one still awake, looked up at her. He wasn't angry. Kids often hold less bitterness than adults. He just nodded once, as if accepting her apology in a simple, honest way. The attendant stepped back quietly, giving them space. The senior attendant approached afterward, checking again if there was anything the family needed. It was clear that the airline had taken the situation seriously, and everyone working on the flight had adjusted their behavior. For the rest of the journey, things remained peaceful. The boys ate a light snack. Their father watched them carefully to ensure they didn't feel nauseous or dizzy. When turbulence shook the cabin briefly, the boys stayed calm, and their father held on to the armrests to steady them. Hours later, when the aircraft's wheels touched down at their destination, a soft applause rippled through the passengers. Some clapped out of habit, some out of relief that the long and emotional flight was finally over, as everyone stood to gather their belongings. Several passengers approached the father and nodded respectfully. One said, You handled everything with so much patience. I'm glad your boys are all right, another added softly. You stood up for them the right way. The father thanked each person with sincerity, never acting as if he wanted attention. He just wanted the day to end safely. The twins walked beside him as they exited the aircraft. One held his backpack in both hands. The other carried a small travel pillow under his arm. They didn't look tired anymore. They looked ready to step out into the bright airport terminal and continue life without carrying the stress of the flight. Before they left the gate area, the captain approached the family once more. He was calm, respectful, spoke with the kind of seriousness people only use when they mean every word. I'm glad your boys are well, he said. Please know that the safety of every passenger is our responsibility. Today was a reminder of that. Thank you for handling things professionally, the father replied. He shook the captain's hand, making the moment respectful but brief. Then he placed a hand gently on each of the twins' shoulders and guided them toward the exit as they walked into the terminal. Sunlight filtered in through the large windows. The boys lifted their faces toward it, as if letting the tension dissolve in the bright afternoon glow. The father's steps were steady and confident. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't unsettled. He was simply focused on his children and the journey ahead. Behind them, inside the plane they had just left, the crew continued to reflect on everything that had unfolded. The younger attendant, especially, seemed to carry the weight of it in a way that might change how she approached her job forever. Outside, the world went on. People hurried to their flights, rolled suitcases behind them, reunited with family members, checked schedules on glowing screens. No one knew the story that had played out on that single aircraft, except for those who lived it. For the twins, the lesson wasn't about anger or fear. It was about how someone who loved them protected them without raising his voice or losing control. It was about recognizing that mistakes happen, but taking responsibility matters. It was about knowing that their health and safety were worth standing up for,